Hi, everyone. My name is Kelly Sayre, and I'm a retail analyst with the IHL Group. And welcome to the IHL webinar, Retail's Radical Transformation, Real Opportunities, Beyond the Retail Apocalypse to a Brighter Future. Much of the news about retail for the last 2 years has been negative, but many would be surprised to know that retail is not only growing in sales, but also in the number of stores. But retail is changing and changing fast. Consumers who used to have to shop must now want to shop. And there are clear winners and losers by segments. These slides are a subset of the report called Retail's Radical Transformation, Real Opportunities under the Research and Advisory tab at our website, ihlservices.com. Our panelists today are Greg Busick, President of IHL Group, and Lee Holman, Vice President of Research and Product Development. We would like to thank our sponsors for this webinar. Without them, we could not have been able to undertake the giant effort this was to complete this research. Specifically, our title sponsors, Ceridian and Diebold Nixdorf, and our gold level sponsors, Toshiba, Intel, and CDW. Thank you. Today, you will have the opportunity to ask questions throughout the webinar in the interface. Simply click on the question tab in the sidebar of the webinar. We encourage you to ask your questions throughout the webinar, and we will try to address all questions during the Q&A period later in the call. Without further delay, let me turn it over to Greg Busick, President of IHL Group.
Thanks, Kelly. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining today. Wanted to start with kind of the genesis of this research and kind of how we got started in the first place with this. About a year and a half ago, we started getting a lot of news out there, negative news that was hitting the mainstream press. And yet our experience in the industry, as well as the data that we saw coming from the government, didn't actually correspond to what was happening in the mainstream press. And it finally dawned on us that our mainstream press has truly become one not of subscriptions, but rather of clicks, and bad news sells. So we set out at the request of some vendors actually to look at the market and see what's really going on. And as such, I'm going to go through a little background about the US economy, retail economy, and then everything that's going on right now and how that thing is changing and how that affects store counts. The real story in 2012 or 2017, during the retail apocalypse, retail sales actually increased $232 billion. Now, to put that in perspective, that's the equivalent of adding the retail GDP of South Korea, the fourth largest economy in Asia, to our retail economy in 1 year. We just added that as growth. Some segments are doing terrific, specifically C-stores, dollar stores, mass merchants, warehouse clubs as well. We had DIY furniture, men's clothing, and toys actually were doing quite well in 2017. However, our mall-based stores, particularly department stores and soft goods, and appliance and sporting goods were down for 2017. Our online sales were up 18% over the holidays. They represented 25% of retail growth for the year. Pure play retail still, though, is only 10.2% of total retail. Everybody likes to blame Amazon there, but it's a very small piece of overall retail still today. In total, Amazon was about $29 billion of that growth, of that $232 billion in growth. Now, this doesn't include the Whole Foods acquisition, but if you just talk about pure play Amazon online sales, they're 29% of that growth. So we ended the year with the tax cuts coming into play that was creating a strong net positive for our retailers, particularly for customers, for profits, and reinvestments. So how are things going in 2018? Well, retail sales are up even greater in the first 7 months of 2018. Our economy grew $190.6 billion, our retail economy, in the first 7 months. The projected growth is in the 4.5% range, but all too often it's still being reported as a retail apocalypse or negative in the mainstream press. To put in perspective the things that are the size of this growth, these are the retailers, the equivalent annual revenues that have been added to our economy in the first 7 months. So these 8 retailers, Staples, Dollar General, Best Buy, Gap, TJ Maxx, or TJX, McDonald's, Bed Bath & Beyond, and JCPenney, the equivalent of their annual revenue has been added to our retail economy in 2018. Or to put it another way, we've grown in North America the equivalent of the entire annual retail GDP of Scandinavia so far, and we're on track to add Spain to that by the end of the year. Now, you saw that I had toys listed there. Well, what happened to Toys R Us? What happened was private equity and too much debt. Toys R Us was leveraged with $7 billion of debt that put them in a position that they were a Formula One race car running on Chicago streets. And they couldn't handle any sort of change in market, and they couldn't make the changes necessary to change their behavior, their online sales, and all the things that they needed to compete with. The next 4 slides, for those of you that sat through the presentation last year, you're going to notice several of these slides are the same because the underlying trends have not changed in the marketplace. Number one, the U.S. consumer continues to be challenged. Inflation rate on necessities is greater than the overall income growth. So as you'll see, these core care areas of necessities, childcare, healthcare, food and beverage, and housing are growing greater than the 55% overall inflation rate from 1996 to 2016. When you look at the overall incomes, you also see that the growth rate of those incomes doesn't surpass the baseline of 55% until you get to the 3rd quintile. When you look at the overall growth rates that we're showing for childcare, healthcare, food and beverage, and housing, honestly, nobody has kept up with that growth in that level in terms of quintiles, except for your top 10% of the folks there. And quite frankly, I don't think anybody except Facebook millionaires and Google millionaires have kept up with college inflation for textbooks and college tuition. So you've got a consumer that is increasingly squeezed in terms of their disposable income and what they're able to do. As well, most malls have been built for the middle class. The middle class used to represent 61% of the population and 62% of the money in the early 70s. It's now 50% of the population and 43% of the money in the market. Yet we've built malls, particularly malls and other retail properties, at a rate 4 times the population growth since 1975. There is no organization that oversees retail building and as a thing. This would be akin to, in some places with malls, be like taking, say, Louisville as a place for an expansion NFL team, and rather than just putting 1 in there, hoping the city could handle 1, you have 3 that get built into the same city. That's what's happened with all of these different malls being built. And because of this mall structure, it became very, very easy for specialty stores and department stores. Hey, if it works in 100, let's roll it out to 500. So where we have issues are in those C and D class malls. The second area is the rise of fast fashion. We had a rapid growth and a rapid change when it came to fashion and the supply chain and the speed of replenishing the supply chain. We went from a 9-month lead time in many cases to 21 days in many cases. And fast fashion has just changed the entire dynamic regarding clothing, particularly women's fashion, that's heavily mall dominated. As well, we saw the breakout of cosmetics and beauty from department stores. So those were high margin products that got pushed out. So these are the underlying core trends that have faced and pushed this narrative negative out there. So we wanted to look at what's the actual market, what's going on overall. And once again, we started with our Sophia product that looks at 2,700 retailers and restaurants in North America. We narrowed those down so that we only had parents or subs, because you have some cases like Kroger, for instance, that has Kroger stores and the Kroger company. So we wanted to not double count there. And then we only focused on those companies with 50 or more locations. So it resulted in 1,485 retailers with 50 or more locations that we studied. Now we're only looking at net opens and net closes. So for each chain, we did not count the number of opens and the number of closes there and report both of them, with a rare exception in the study where there's a big acquisition of some sort. What we've done is this retailer opened so many, they closed so many, so we're reporting the net of that. And we are purposely conservative. We don't include the smaller mom and pop place. We do not include the people like Warby Parker or Amazon or some of the others that have pure showroom stores that are adding stores there, that they don't have more than 50 stores already. And we do not include foreign retailers that are operating here unless they have 50 or more stores. With that, we still want to talk about the fact that e-commerce is rising. This is a big issue that still remains to this day and is not going away. We are projecting at IHL that by 2021, e-commerce will represent 25% of all retail. However, because of things like click and collect, buy online, pick up in store, and ship from stores, 81% of all retail will actually have a store component. So a lot of people want to look at e-commerce and say e-commerce is the opposite of stores. No, not at all. It's actually part of stores in many, many ways. When you think of when it comes to grocery, when you think of hospitality in any manner, those click and collect, ship from store, buy online, pick up in store, they all have that store component there. So what's the net result of our research? The net result is that in 2018, we're seeing a projected 12,663 opens and 8,828 closures for a net store opens or increase of store counts of 3,835 stores. Now you'll notice that there are 3 particular segments that are negative and several others that are positive. There are some unique aspects of each one of those that Lee is going to share that gets into more details here. The drugstores, the change in drugstores is specifically related to Walgreens acquisition and divestiture with Rite Aid. The department stores, we have things related to Sears and Macy's and Bon-Tons and others that are at play there. And then we've got a number of things happening in specialty soft goods for a net of 909. Now, if you remember last year, that number for soft goods was a minus 2,700, I believe, or 2,900 stores. So this is a great improvement over the previous year. However, those are the 3 segments that you're seeing. So we're literally looking at a merger and some mall-based stores where things are going down. Every other aspect of retail is growing and is growing quite healthily. So with that, I'll turn it over to Lee.
Thanks, Greg. Before we dig into the data in a real deep way, I want to make sure that everybody understands how we at IHL view the retail industry. We don't just look at the top line. We go down and look at a little more granular level. And what you're seeing here are the 10 retail segments that Greg had on the previous slide. And rather than provide a definition for each of them, we just went ahead and plugged in retailer names so that you have a feel for what we're talking about when we talk about a mass merchant. The bottom line with these guys is for a given retail segment, they're providing this similar product line to the consumer. And long story short, they kind of look like one another within a given retail segment. Safeway kind of looks like Kroger. McDonald's kind of looks like Burger King. And you get the drift there. You might wonder why restaurants are on this slide. And there's 2 real good reasons. Number one, the Census Bureau insists on including them when they're talking about their retail trade numbers on a monthly basis. And it kind of makes sense because it's the same consumer pool that you're dealing with, and it's a similar kind of transaction that's happening in a given location. We have on the previous slide with the FDCM, the GMS, and the restaurants, we refer to those as super segments, if you will. And what we've done is we've broken down the data accordingly. This is the same data that Greg showed on the previous slide, and it's just cut just a little bit differently to fit into these super segments, if you will. Again, the GMS segments, they're having a tough time in terms of store counts and so forth. But and it's a weird thing, but last year was really tough, but this year it looks better, even though it's a negative number. The second main reason why we include restaurants in this has to do with the technology vendors. These guys look at hospitality, which includes restaurants as well as lodging and the entertainment venues, in a pretty much a similar manner. It's still a good or service that's being provided in a transaction setting there with the customer. So that's the main reason we include restaurants there, and they're part of that one of those three super segments. Now, before we get too deep into the data, understand something. We at IHL, we believe that the fact that a retailer is closing stores in and of itself is not necessarily a bad thing. Likewise, the fact that a retailer is opening stores in and of itself is not necessarily a good thing. What do we mean by that? Well, a healthy retailer is going to be assessing the condition of each and every one of the stores that he has in his chain. And if he comes across a group of stores that are performing less well than the entire rest of the chain, they're going to look at each of those stores and they're going to make a determination as to whether A, they can invest more in that store and thereby increase its productivity, or B, close that store and repurpose the resources that were going into it. All right. So a healthy retailer is gonna do that. So healthy retailers do close stores on occasion. By the same token, unhealthy retailers can open lots of stores, and we've seen evidence of that the last several years as some retailers used very cheap money to go ahead and buy up lots of real estate, open lots of stores, and open them more rapidly than they could actually sustain. All right. So long story short, we believe that somewhere in the 1% to 2% range of store openings or store closings is probably healthy for retailers going forward. Now, as we look at the FDC banners, again, these are the same guys we saw on the previous sheet. What we're showing here is the ratio of those banners in a given segment that are opening stores or increasing their store count, and those banners that are closing. In the case of superstores and warehouse clubs, what we're looking at there is Sam's Club is actually indicating they're going to close a couple of stores this year. So they're in the red there, and then BJ's and some of the other guys are in the green there. So some of the things that are going on in mass merchandisers for store closings, there you've got the Kmart's and the Fred's. Those guys are closing stores. And on the flip side of that, the Dollar Generals and the Dollar Trees, they're opening lots of stores. Drugstores, again, Greg mentioned it before, the Rite Aid acquisition with Walgreens is the main component of the red numbers there. But at the same time, there's also retailers like GNC and Perfumania that are closing stores also. Long story short, in the FDCM super segment, for every banner that's closing stores, 3.7 more are opening stores. For the GMS banners, this is where things get a little bit more exciting. You can see that the red portion of each bar is significantly bigger than it looks like on the previous slide. Especially soft goods. There's a number of retailers there that are closing stores. The Signet, the jeweler is one of them. Ascena, Gymboree, Payless. These guys are all closing stores, and you'll see their names on some of the following sheets when we look at some of the retailers that are closing lots of stores for the coming year. Or for the current year. In especially hard goods, included among those are companies like Radio Shack and Best Buy and Orchard Supply, who recently announced that they were closing all 99 of their stores. For department stores, Greg mentioned Sears and Bon-Ton. Those are two biggies there that are having a tough time. Even with all that, all the negative news there, still there are 1.5 banners opening stores for every one that's closing stores. That's on the positive side of things. So things are actually getting better in this part of town. For restaurants, you've got a lot of green on this slide. Subway and Chipotle are a couple of the fast food guys that are closing stores this year, and we'll see some of their numbers in just a moment. For the bar restaurants, and here we're talking about table service type restaurants. Macaroni Grill and TGI Fridays are among those that tend to close stores this year. The in terms of those that are opening stores, at least in the bar restaurant group, they're guys that are opening somewhere between 5 and 12 stores. There's a lot of retailers or a lot of restaurateurs that are doing that for this current year. As we move to the store count growth, this is the retail part of things. No restaurants in this slide here. The Walgreens is that's part and parcel of the acquisition of Rite Aid. And again, this is not 1,175 stores that are springing up out of nowhere. This is 1,175 stores that are now coming under Walgreens umbrella, if you will. There are some brand new builds in this. But the bulk of it is going to be as a result of the acquisition or the M&A activity with Rite Aid. 7-Eleven likewise, they had an announcement that actually started last year and was closed earlier this year of acquisition of about 1,100 or so stores from Sunoco. Again, there's some brand spanking new stores that are included in this 1049 number for 7-Eleven. But again, the bulk of that is going to be stuff that's transferred over from Sunoco. Dollar General, this year they're showing they're opening 900 stores. Last year they opened 1,285 stores. Couche-Tard, last year 591 stores. Dollar Tree last year 501 stores. O'Reilly 190 stores. AutoZone 167 stores. All the numbers I just gave you were the number of stores these guys opened last year. So these guys appeared on this chart last year and they're still on this chart this year. That's an indication these guys are plotting and planning. They're looking to increase their store count and engage the consumer pool in that manner. One of the ones I really like watching is Five Below, sorry about that. One of the ones I really like is Five Below, and that has more to do with the fact that my daughter really, really, really loves going in that store. Next slide, please. There we go. Okay, the big blue bar at the top is Rite Aid. That number, that 1871 number, that's going to be somewhat in flux until the end of the year. We still don't have a good, clear understanding and definition of exactly what that number is going to be. But as of a week and a half ago, that's the best number that we could come up with for what's going on there. The Stripes C-Stores number, the 536, that is part of the Sunoco deal with 7-Eleven. Toys R Us, the 527 there includes the Babies R Us. I think there's a couple stores that are still, got their lights on and so forth, but for the most part, they're done. They've closed up shop. They're history. Radio Shack also is closing 250 stores. No, they didn't close them all last year. Last year they closed 946. And there's still some idea that they might be able to keep a few open. That remains to be seen. Sears and Kmart, they're showing 154 closings this year, and there was just a couple 3 weeks ago there was an announcement of more that were closing. So we captured those. But going forward, there may be even more that close towards the end of the year. I'm not real sure just yet. Last year, that total was minus 426 for them. And then Payless Shoe Source is showing 100 stores that they're closing this year. That's along the lines of, well, that looks a whole lot better than the 800 that they closed last year. Now, one thing I want to point out that when you're talking about these big numbers like this, sometimes it's easy to get lost in the big number. But here's the reality: Payless in closing 100 stores is actually only closing about 3.8% of their store base. Okay, so the 3.8%, that's almost double the max that we tend to show for a healthy retailer. So it's not like catastrophe for them, but it's something that needs to be watched. The Children's Place, on the other hand, in closing 100 stores, that represents 28% of their store base. So that's a very different situation that's going on there compared to Payless. Now, on the flip side of things, When you talk about some of the guys before, there's Dollar Tree was opening 300 stores. That represents about 2% of their base. Okay, so it's important to understand the size of retailer that you're talking about, rather than just these massive numbers that the news media likes to pump out there. With that, let's talk about restaurants. There we go. Starbucks at the top there, 437 stores. Last year they opened 974. Okay, so they've slowed their growth down a little bit, and this is separate from their Chivana. Okay, so this is just Starbucks stores in the U.S. Freshie is another one that's up and coming. That's 200 stores, and that's actually pretty aggressive growth for them, because that represents 54% of their store base. Jersey Mike's, Wendy's, Domino's, these guys, Wendy's and Domino's were on last year's list. Domino's opened 250 last year, another 120 this year. Taco Bell opening 70 this year. They opened 275 restaurants last year. That's some pretty impressive numbers there. Now, when you get down into the Culvers and Zaxby's and so forth, those guys are in the 40 to 41 restaurant. And most of those guys are in the 4 to 6% of their store base increase there. So that's a little more aggressive than what we view as healthy, but they believe they can sustain that. So that's something to watch going forward. On the flip side of things, when we're talking about the declines in the restaurant counts, Subway, 500 stores that they're closing this year. Again, keep in mind they've got 28,000 stores, so that's 1.8% of their store base. We view that in the range of a healthy adjustment. Tijuana, 77 stores. Originally, they were going to close all of them, but somebody filed suit, and they were allowed to keep 77 of them. They were allowed to close 77 and had to keep the rest of them open. I don't know all the details about that, but I thought that was kind of interesting. Chipotle is another one. They're closing 65 stores. That's about 3%. So that's not out of the realm of healthy. It's reasonable. In McDonald's case, that's less than 0.5% of their store base going forward. Then you see a whole lot of restaurants that are going to close 20, between right around 20 restaurants. Most of those are in the 5 to anywhere from 3 to 5% range of their overall store base. Now, I made mention of some of the openings and closings with reference to last year. Here we have the numbers, based on what based on the totals from last year and the totals this year. Obviously, drugstores is the one on the FTC segments that has the red negative numbers. Again, this refers back to the Rite Aid acquisition. But everybody else is in the positive range. The C stores and mass merchants, warehouse clubs, they're growing, but it's just a tiny bit subdued from last year. But food and grocery, that's growing in a big way. That's 3.5x from the year before. GMS segments, hard goods are pretty much where they were last year, just within one store count of the same number. Department stores, they're closing more than they did last year, so that's not a good trend. And soft goods are closing considerably less than they did last year, so that's on the positive side of things. When we look at restaurants, that's all green on that sheet. Some of the ones in the table service arena that are opening stores this year are Texas Roadhouse and Steak and Shake. First Watch is another one, and Freshie, and a lot of these guys, they're opening stores, but the number that they're opening is down in the 8 to 12 restaurant range. And there's a lot of guys that are doing those kinds of numbers. And with that, let me toss it back to Greg.
All right, thanks, Lee. The main thing to point out here is when you look at the closings, last year, 16 retailers represented 48% of the total closings. This year, 16 retailers represent 66% of the total closings. So we've seen a massive improvement in terms of the overall retailer support there. And what are the characteristics of the people that are really struggling? They either expanded too much, took on way too much debt, or have not updated their infrastructure and their customer experience. Those retailers that have not done those things are the ones that are most likely at risk of closing stores going forward. And as you'll notice, several of those places that were listed in the closings are people that have been dying for quite a few years and closing stores like on a trickle for years and years and years. I look at Sears and Kmart as related to them, and Radio Shack, very similar experience of basically death by 1,000 cuts, not updating the store experience at all, not investing in stores. Those are the ones that are in deep trouble going on. So what are the things that retailers must do to improve their stores and what's going on? Really, there's two things. So number one, need to improve the experience, and number two, they must attack their out of stocks. Customers that are coming to retail stores for two primary reasons. One is they're looking for an experience, or two, they're looking for expertise. And retail stores need to be able to provide that in their environment. And number two, retailers must attack their apathy towards out of stocks. And I'm going to share some data that is quite frightening to traditional retailing for those retailers who are not willing to address their out of stock issue and are still in denial of things. The first data point is 55% of US households now are Amazon Prime members. And what's even more scary for your traditional retailers, 69% of the households with over $100,000 in income are Amazon Prime members. So they have free 2-day shipping on just about anything that they want to buy, but they're still choosing to come to your stores. So how are those folks doing? How are the people that are non-Prime members doing? What's the impact in terms of what they're doing with their dollars of shopping online versus shopping at the store, and how do you combat that? This is a study we did as part of our out of stock, out of luck study as part of that research. If that's another free study that's on our website. If you go down to the same place that you would get this study on our website in the research tab down to the bottom to white papers, you will get access to this data in more detail. For online shopping growth, this is the disparity of what happens with Amazon Prime members and the percentage of the budget that goes to online purchases versus store purchases. And I've highlighted two areas here, most specifically electronics and clothing. Amazon has been really, really slow in compared to other segments or their other areas in terms of getting people to buy clothing on their site. It's still a struggle for them. However, when it comes to Prime members, 30% of their budget is online. Once these folks realize what size they are for a particular retailer, particular brand, it becomes much easier for them to just buy it online, because the likelihood of the store having the color or the brand that they want in their size is far less likely because of the problems with out of stocks. And they're moving more and more towards online. So when you see the struggles of specialty stores and department stores, the inability to attack out of stocks, and particularly addressing the real sizes of the people that are shopping there, is a big issue, and it's the number one issue that's hurting them at this point in time. So why do customers actually come to the stores? They come to the stores because they need it now, and they want to touch and feel the product. They want to experience the product, or they have questions about the product and are looking for expertise. And there's a couple other things that they do. You know, they don't want to play delivery, they want to support their local, or for convenience. The main thing here is if you miss on these first two items, you miss, period. And the next slide is going to show why this is so devastating when you have 55% of the population has free 2-day shipping, because the results of an out of stock are absolutely critical to what's going on in the market today. So this is probably the single biggest chart, revealing chart of things in the deck. And this is what happens when customers encounter an out of stock at a retail store and what they do. And I'm going to highlight two particular arrows there. You see the people that aren't Prime customers, they go to a competitor store. 29% of the time they go to a competitor store, but not the Amazon Prime members. They literally just flip their phone out and order it online. And the danger of that is once they've bought it online once, they're less likely to consider your store for that product ever again. I'll give you a perfect example. Went to my local sporting goods store. My son's a running back on the football team this year. Wanted to get him some rib protectors at my local sporting goods store. Go down there, they've got all kinds of them for kids that are 6 to 8 years old that want to be protected there. They had absolutely none for high school age or adults. I had to go order that online at Amazon. Another example, I went to a big box retailer, electronics retailer for a Microsoft Surface computer. I was there. They said it was in stock. 20 minutes later, the guy came back and said I could not find it. Whipped out my phone and I ordered that $1,000 item from Amazon. This is a huge problem, and I know I'm not the only one that's experiencing this problem of retailers, their inventory simply not matching up to what the customer expectations are when they come into their stores. In fact, how big of a problem? We're able to quantify that retailers are losing 3.4% of same-store sales due to out of stocks. And when you look at fashion and apparel, when you get into color and size, it's as much as 9% of same-store sales because they don't have in stock the product and they don't have the visibility of the real inventory. Most retailers are off as much as 25%. A lot of times that product is sitting in a dressing room or has just been pilfered. And they do not have an accurate view of their inventory. They think they do, their system thinks they do, but they're working off of bad data. And that's why we are big proponents of technologies like RFID and computer vision, because the survivability of retailers and retail stores, particularly in department stores and apparel, really comes down to accurate inventory. If you cannot fulfill the order because your inventory is wrong, you can't make the sale, and thus you're going to lose that sale to online competitors or those retailers who can do that at their store level. The big thing here, we were able to quantify in this research that up to 24% of Amazon's US retail sales can be attributed to customers who first tried to come to the store but found the store out of stock for the items that they went in there. We actually asked consumers and asked the difference between Prime members and non-Prime members, what they did once they did that, once they encountered that. By extrapolating that total and looking at Amazon's retail sales, we could quantify up to 24% of those sales, once again, were from people that actually tried to shop in the stores first, but found those stores out of stock. And with that, we're going to turn it over to Kelly to open it up for questions.
Thank you so much. So just wanted to remind you that you can enter a question over on the right-hand side. But let's see where we're going to start today. How about this? The numbers you are showing for 2017 here are different than what you shared last year. Why the difference?
That's a great question. I'll go ahead with that one. I think the biggest thing to remember is we are making estimates based on company statements and financials as of August of last year. And the biggest changes that occurred in the data fell into three categories. Number one was the Walgreens and the Rite Aid. That flipped several things. So there's about 1,700 stores. So out of 594,000 stores that we reviewed, we were off by about 1,700 stores. A big part of that was the change with the Walgreens piece and Rite Aid. The next piece was a number of the the super centers that were planning to open stores by the end of 2017. Those big properties got pushed into 2018, and that moved some of the data there. The third area is related to fashion and department stores, where Sears did more of a trickle and announced more stores afterwards, but we also had about 200, 300 stores related to specialty stores that got added. So that's why the difference between the 2017 actual data that we had versus the projections that we had last year.
Great. And the next one, what will be the effect on retail be in the event inflation continues to rise?
Lee, you want to take that one?
Well, I mean, we're actually seeing a little bit of it right now. If you go by any gas station, prices really don't seem to reflect what's going on in the rest of the economy. Prices continue to go up, and I guess long story short, as inflation increases and people, especially in the middle, what is now known as the middle class and the lower class, get ever more squeezed, they're going to be, heading more towards dollar stores and the value type store than they would in any of the other types of specialty stores that they may have been using before.
And now I'll add to that. We had tax cuts that came into play this year, and the first thing that happens whenever you have tax cuts, you can go back for the last 3 times that we've had a tax cut, oil prices go up, the gas goes up, and that has a tremendous impact on a lot of different areas there, but a lot of that gets absorbed. I will tell you though that because the unemployment rate is so much lower than it's been in the past, you're seeing customers eat out more, and you're continuing to see that. That will be the first sector that gets hit, will be the dining out, as that is the most disposable of the income, so to speak, or discretionary of the incomes, is where you go out or if you go out as a family.
Okay, great. Were you able to determine what level of closings are attributable to the segment lines blurring and the impact of that cannibalization?
No, we didn't look at it so much in that respect as we just looked at it on an individual retailer basis. There's certain aspects of that. I think the major trends though that we saw in terms of the middle class shrinking, the increase of the dollar stores and the discounters and off-pricers like TJX and Ross stores, that growth is more impactful than kind of the blurring of the segments between grocery and general merchandise, or fuel and grocery, or C-stores and fresh foods. We're seeing some impact. There is some bleed over there, but that's having very little in the grand scheme of things compared to these other trends.
Okay, I'm gonna go to this one. The comment, traditional retailers grew their businesses faster than pure play retailers, which grew 18.7% in 2018. Can you explain that?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that is happening is, although many of your traditional store-based retailers were slow to build up their e-commerce and get all their systems together, like we say, unified commerce. You want to get to a single version of the truth about your inventory, single version of the truth about your customers. Many of those got that put together and are now exploiting that ability and that reach with their customers there. The other things that's happening that's related to that is many of the pure play folks are literally opening stores because they have to have places for returns. They need to have places where people can touch and feel the product. So that's a big thing. And quite frankly, I think there's a bit of an issue with pure play, many pure play retailers, the smaller guys, when it comes to customer service. I've had 2 recent experiences where I bought something and wanted to return, and the first response from their customer service has been to insult me as a customer that I must be using the product wrong. You can't usually do that in a traditional store when you're face to face, but you've got sort of the Twitter mentality of things there. If that's the way they're going to do customer service, they're not going to be long for this world. So I think there's a lot happening with the traditional stores that are now doing things. We're seeing a huge uptick in click and collect there, where stores are involved with that. Certainly with that and buy online, pick up in store, you see an uptick once that customer comes into the store environment. The flip side of that, when you're looking at groceries, you have click and collect where impulse items are not part of things. Now, I will tell you the out of stock issue that we talked about quite a bit is something that's been really, really exposed in the grocery segments in particular with the new online ordering, because in the past, a lot of the substitutions were hidden. If you wanted Kellogg's Raisin Bran and they were out, you would walk in the store and you choose on your own to get Post Raisin Bran as a substitute. Well, you can't do that when it's defined as Kellogg's Raisin Bran there without exposing that you're out of stock. And if you're out of stock and you choose wrong or you cancel that item, you actually then force your customer to go to a competitor, and that's a problem. So a lot of these retailers are really struggling with these issues right now on how to do this and how to do it profitably. But we're seeing dramatic growth in the traditional retailers and their online growth there.
Okay, so what is the impact of these retail changes by market type, primary, secondary, etc.?
I'm not sure I understand the question that we haven't asked or answered already.
And that was from Kevin. So Kevin, if you're still online, if you want to type, I will try and track that. Okay, what do you think are the greatest risks and opportunities for retail REITs? REIT.
For REITs?
Yes.
I think there's still room to grow for off-mall properties where you can get in and out quickly. I think the greatest risk for the REITs that are out there today in mall-based properties is malls have to begin looking at some of these other formats and other things outside of retail to drive traffic to that mall. The main thing is you've got to have those that traffic to your malls in the first place. And if you're just relying on traditional specialty and department stores only, you're going to have issues. In Europe, it's a super center and the warehouse club and the grocery store that are the anchor stores. And I think we're going to be moving more and more to that sort of environment for your B, C, and D malls. The A malls can still handle the traditional department stores and high-end stores in that environment, but your B, C, and Ds will not be able to do that. So I think that is an implication. If I was in charge of a REIT or doing that kind of investment with my malls, one of the things I would definitely push back on is to make sure that they're not forcing their retailers to use their bandwidth at that level. We're seeing a lot of retailers be restricted on the level of IT transformation that they can do because they're based in a mall. The mall covenants require them to pay for the network of the mall. And as a result, many of the actual activities related to the mall are hampering the actual success of those retailers in the mall, and that is a problem there. So the REITs that, once again, that are heavy on off mall properties, that are focused on the population of the discounters and the off price type folks and food places, they're going to continue to do well. The traditional malls are going to struggle unless they're A-class malls or they reprovision that space.
Yep.
Okay, we've been talking about OOS for 20 plus years and it doesn't seem to be improving. Technology is further along than ever before, so why is it still such a problem?
I think the biggest issue right now is retailers. There's internal. Sometimes the merchants are not incentivized for the right things, and this is a problem we've had in retail for a long, long time. Merchants are the people that are doing the buying and the products. They're incentivized on sales and they're incentivized on gross margin. They're not incentivized on being in stock. And that is a huge, huge cultural issue that's involved here. The second thing is to deploy RFID. RFID works great for fashion. It works great for many, many things. But to take that hit and some of the business models related to that to get to that accurate inventory, that is something that many retailers haven't. So we've been working with vendors to make it more of a as a service type of environment to lower the cost of that for retailers because the impact is dramatic. We've seen ROIs as quick as 3 months on things, and dramatic increase in the knowledge and availability and of where that inventory is. You cannot do ship from store without RFID in a fashion environment. You just don't know what you have to be able to fulfill those orders there. But RFID doesn't work in all situations. You're going to have to deploy some of the computer vision technologies for those other items within your store that might have a high metal content or a liquid content. There are food products that are involved there. And in many ways, the computer vision is not kept up as much as the RFID. So we've kind of got a disconnect on the full solution. And there are some solutions coming down the pike that are really, really strong in this area that will be able to combine that. We know of one big box retailer who just did their fashion, and they were able to reduce their inventory on fashion 20% while improving the actual category in terms of being in stock. And that's a massive amount of freed up capital to do other things in that store.
Great, and we are continuing to get questions coming in. So if you haven't asked your question, we do still have about 10 minutes left. Here's another one. We are a local mom and pop furniture store, although large in the area. We focus on made in America and high quality, which helps us stand out from the cheaper stuff. Do you have any advice on growth? We relied heavily on social media, and now that is tanking.
Well, I'll go first, and Lee, if you want to chime in. I really think if you're a mom and pop retailer, you want to tap into the Walmart and Amazon marketplaces. Online is becoming more about marketplaces than it is about a particular thing or a particular retailer or a particular retail banner. 55% of all online search for products starts at Amazon.com. So, pick who you want to partner with in relation to that. Ann Taylor has partnered with Walmart, which changes kind of the demographic and the brand image a little bit in so doing. And others have chosen Amazon. Between 1990 and 2000, Walmart went from 4 to over 2,000 supercenters, and 2 million retailers, small businesses, went out of business. We're seeing the opposite opportunity right now because of these marketplaces, that you have the opportunity to tap into all those Amazon Prime members, for instance, and get access to those folks. You just need to be able to deliver within those 2 days that you're meant to do in that environment. So I would tap into one of those marketplaces for sure.
The only other thing I'd add to that is that the tendency might be to maybe compromise on what got you there in the first place. I'd say hold fast to the things that you've embraced. Hold fast to the things that make you stand out, and embrace the market and let's see what happens with that.
Great. Okay, next question. Is in-store execution the only blame for out of stocks, or does forecasting and overall vendor shipping performance play a role too?
It's all related. However, not knowing what your actual in-stock position is, when you don't have the truth, all those forecasting and all those buying decisions are based on bad data. And you can't improve it without having the actual clear data at the store level. It's not really a store execution situation. It's a lack of visibility at the store because you're not leveraging the technology that's in place. If you're doing a physical inventory at best once a month, or in most cases once or twice a year, retailers can be off as much as 25% in what the truth is at their store. Now you can play the slice, you can play the safety stock level, but when you're off as much as 25%, you're really not going to be successful in an environment where you've got customers coming in. And this is particularly true when you're dealing with apparel, because you're talking about size and color. So you have that complexity as well. Lee and I are different sizes when we walk into the same store. You may have Lee's size, you don't have mine, or vice versa. A lot of times that's hidden if you don't have really accurate inventory via the systems like RFID.
Okay, and then we have 3 questions from the same person. I'll try and ask them the easier ones to answer first. Do you plan to do similar research for the Latin America area?
Not currently. However, if we have sponsors who are willing to pay for that research, yes, we will look at doing that. But right now, we don't have any plans for that.
Okay. Do you have numbers of total store count for each store brand that are closing and opening?
We
So
do,
instead of the
yeah,
balance.
we do, but we don't release that data at that level of detail. It's mainly because it's a massive undertaking when you're talking about 1,700 or actually 2,700 retailers that you're going through.
Okay. And then how will the new tariff affect retailers?
Lee, you want to go with that one or?
Well, yeah, that tariff has to be defined first. Um, yeah, I think the word tariff strikes fear into the hearts of most, especially consumers, because all of a sudden they figure that everything's going to cost more. The amazing thing about the market economy, though, is that this will give rise to some innovation in this country. There may be more manufacturing developed, new businesses established, and so forth and so on. So, how are retailers going to be impacted? Well, they'll probably have to resource some of the things they provide in their stores. And some of that sourcing might come from right here in the good old U.S. of A.
So I think to add to what Lee said there, about what is the actual tariff on, certain areas have been defined. I will, this is somewhat controversial. I don't like the idea of tariffs. I will say that the nebulous nature of it is kind of helping slow the economy down a little bit. An economy that's growing at a rapid pace that has worries of getting too hot. And so as much as I hate the aspects of the idea of tariffs and all of that, I think it does serve a role of trying to slow down an overheating economy in place. And by keeping it nebulous without the specifics, it never actually hits in big ways to where it has a ginormous impact on the economy. That's how it's been done up to this point in time. I suspect that we'll continue to get tweaks of that nature. I think, if you think about what happened with NAFTA there and those tweets, and now all of a sudden we have sort of an agreement with Mexico, things start to come back around there. And I think the same thing will be true with tariffs. It's a way of slowing down the heating economy right now. But that being said, there are some real lives that are involved in terms of impact when it comes to farmers and manufacturers, and I hate that part.
Right. And the last question that I've gotten, how does augmented reality play in the overall strategies for both optimized store operations and differentiation, I can't speak, excuse me, differentiation in customer experience?
Well, I
It's
think
hard.
this is one of those areas where this is something new and cool and sexy and that sort of thing. So retailers that embrace this, obviously, they're going to be in the apparel fields. There's maybe some of the others, but a lot of that, you're definitely going to want to have that done right in the lab before you even think about putting it out there in the public. Because if you put it out there and it's not ready for prime time, and the public starts using it, it's going to be like some of the vending machines that you've seen that people just pass by. They don't even bother with anymore. I haven't seen it working yet to the point where it's ready for prime time and on a large scale.
I think you're going to have bandwidth speeds that have to be a lot faster and latency to have to be a lot less before it's even a real impact on things. But it's a nice to have. There are certain technologies that are a must have that retailers have to do. Number one, they've got to have a single version of the truth on their inventory and fix those out of stocks. Number two, they have to have a single version of their customer data across all those stores. Number three, they have to have an updated LAN, WAN infrastructure at the store level to support the data needs. And number four, they have to have updated point of sale to do that. Once those are done, most retailers, the leaders, are investing in systems to provide better tools for their associates, as well as workforce management, as well as other things related to pricing, forecasting, and things from an execution, inventory visibility, that perspective. Those are the things when you go back to the slides of why people come to the stores. They come because they need it now or they want an experience. Augmented reality has a play at the store level for that experience, but the key thing about the experience is they want it now and they need it quick, more than anything else. So I expect it to be somewhat of a niche. Now online, I think it can be really interesting to see how you can have a visual component of shopping online as if you're going through a store. My challenge with that is I'm not sure how much faster that is. I don't know about you guys, but generally when I shop online, I'm not looking for the nicest website or the coolest website or the greatest videos or anything like that. I'm looking to find the product I'm interested in the quickest and fastest and be able to do that. So I think there's a role. I think it's a limited role in play because a lot of the technology and the latency, you've got people that get on the headsets and they get confused and they get dizzy as a result of that. As well is when you have the augmented reality where things popping up as you go through there, that is also a possibility of the store thing. I think the issue then becomes there more in the realm of privacy and creepiness factor when we talk about ability to see things. Now, I will tell you that if it's something that's there that says, hey, go over this QR code and we're going to show you more information about this, or we'll send you a coupon, or we're going to send you a video or an email on how to use this product, then I think we've got great opportunities there. But just the true sense of the word of you just walking down and things popping up and being there, or putting on goggles and doing, things related to that, I think that's going to be a very small niche.
Yeah, I think back to your other point, they got to get their out of stocks fixed first.
Yeah.
And we did have one last question come in.
Okay.
Lee, Greg, do you have time to answer it quick?
Yep, that's fine.
Okay, sales per square foot has been the relevant metrics for years. However, as we see omnichannel retail be critical for retailer success, you have to start questioning the sales per square foot metric. Do you see another metric that is important with omnichannel retailers?
That's a great question. I don't know what that is yet, but I think it is a better way of doing things, as well as how you measure stores and how you measure, things related to execution. I will tell you that our research has shown, particularly for those areas that are not fashion related, that most retailers have gone to a front-ended fulfillment center rather than using their stores as fulfillment centers. And the reason for that is because there's just not enough orders to be able to have somebody that's dedicated to it that can do things efficiently at the store level. Retailers are great at moving pallets and they're great at moving cases of things through their warehouse and through the back of their stores and their shipping departments. They're not great at moving eaches except at a front end cash wrap. And so we're seeing a lot of different things that retailers are trying. Most of them, they're not as profitable as they want to be because they cannot be optimized at the store level right now. For instance, grocery, how do you deal with the fact that you have 21% of the shopping bill, which was impulse items, and that goes away in a click and collect environment? Or how do you deal with a ship from store in an environment where you may have a 50-pound bag of dog food for one order and a pair of earrings for another? You're talking about various boxes and all those kind of things that have to be put in play. Those are some of the challenges that they're facing there. And all that being said is, yeah, I think there's a new metric. I'm not sure what that metric is outside of putting together all of those e-commerce numbers, combining that and dividing it by a store number or a store execution number based on orders. I don't know what that is yet.
The comment was made that Warby Parker is a good example relating to that question.
Yeah, Apple Stores is a great example of that too.
And then another question that came in, how do you read a retailer's store to know that they are addressing their out of stocks?
Well, you perfectly going in, we look at, as our customers and the consumers we talk to, they define an out of stock as any time they plan to go into a store with money to buy something and leave without buying it, other than the fact that the price was too high. So you know it when you see it. When you walk in and you can't find what you want to buy, and that happens multiple times, you know that retailer's out of stock. Now, that could be that the product's locked up and nobody's there to help, or you can't find somebody to help, or worse yet, that you find somebody to help and they can't find the merchandise. All of those in the customer's mind are out of stocks, and they're driving people to Amazon and other competitors as a result. So you'll know it when you see it. I hate to use that term, but that's literally what it is. You walk into the store and your own personal experience of what you plan to buy there will tell you if the store is doing a decent job or not.
Yeah, and I think further to that point is if you're experiencing that and the retailer insists that they have it in store, but have no clue as to where it is, you know they are not doing what needs to happen.
Well, this concludes our webinar for today. Thank you again to our sponsors for partnering with us on this study. The white paper is available now on our website under the Research and Advisory tab, and have a great rest of your week, everyone.